Welcome, Dan, to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be here.
I'm looking forward to, people will know what we're talking about later. I'm looking forward to Trinity joining us and improving our picture
Yes.
on this video for sure. But right now we'll start with the two guys, and you're doing some really interesting stuff. So I think a good place to start, however, would be just share a little bit about who Dan is, like where you're from originally, where you are now. We'll get into the business stuff in a bit, family, favorite color, maybe something you've never told anybody in the world, and now's the time you want to
Oh,
reveal it. Who knows? But let's start with that, Dan.
well, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think I have any deep, dark secrets for you, Mark, but happy to start with introduction. So I'm Dan, Dan Davidson. I'm in Pasadena, California. Been here for some time now, probably about 13 years. Originally, though, I grew up in a military family. So my father was in the Air Force and F-16 pilot. My older brother is in the Air Force, F-16 pilot. My uncle, a lot of pilots, a lot of Air Force. But growing up, that meant I was moving around about every 3 years. We were moving to a new place. But I've since settled here in Southern California and love Pasadena. Married, and we have 3 kids now. And my oldest is 11, and I have a daughter that's 9, and then my youngest son is 7.
That's awesome. Those are great ages, and I
It's
could,
fun.
I could, I
Yeah,
could.
yeah. This weekend, my son's turning 12, so we're heading down to Legoland.
Legoland,
Yeah,
very cool. I like that. That was pre-computers. That was pretty good stuff.
yeah, exactly.
And,
Oh, kids love Legos today. I grew up playing with Legos. My mom even kept some of them. So like when I go visit my family, they'll pull them out every once in a while for their grandkids, like my kids to play with. And oh yeah. And okay, here's a secret then. I still collect Legos, Mark. I've got my own sets.
well, it's better than if you told me you collected Pokemon cards. So I'm happy to hear that.
Okay, so I have Pokemon cards, but they're not mine. Okay, they're not
Okay.
mine.
So this is on good track here. Maybe we can find out even more deep dark
Just
secrets.
keep digging.
And does your wife know you collect Pokemon? You have Pokemon cards?
Okay, those are my sons. Those are my
Okay,
sons.
this is
Yeah, no. But she's gracious about the Lego sets.
well, Lego. Let's face it, Lego is great for hand-eye coordination, great for thinking, great for a lot of different stuff. So I think,
Yeah, I mean, it was, growing up, I really loved Star Wars, I think, as like most kids growing up in the 80s did. So when they came out with Lego's Star Wars in the like 90s, oh man, I was one of the first on that bandwagon.
well, you gave me a good segue. Thanks. So what were you like as a kid and a teenager? Were you playing Legos all the time? Were you?
Play some Legos. Yeah, good question. So Legos were definitely one of my favorites. But growing up, I think in the military, just definitely exposed me to like a lot of different places. So I feel like I was very interested in learning. I love learning about the different places we moved to. I also really enjoy just getting out and doing different things, new things. So one time I felt like my hobby was to have new hobbies, as I was always trying something new and getting into a different kind of project. But overall, I would say yeah, just maybe like love of learning and trying new things out. So I think I was probably about 8 years old when we were living in Germany, and that was a great place to grow up for a few years at that age because I remember we lived off base and um, we had like just these fields before us. And so my brother and sister and I would go play in the fields. Then they also have woods, like those like Black Forest woods. We go hide in those and play with. So love being outdoors, love that kind of adventurous. Oh, even one time I remember we were coming back from hanging out in the woods. This is before cell phones, right? This is before people had screens. You just like were out there all day, and your parents were like very trustworthy. You could just like go have some fun, and hopefully you made it back. Well, one time I did make it back, thankfully, but we had stopped by this like small creek, and it had just kind of like started to like fill up with some of the recent rain, and we were like kicking some dirt clods into it, like having a good time. And all of a sudden, I fell in and I started getting like carried away. But thankfully, my older brother's there. He, being the hero, jumped in, pulled me out, saved me. But that was, I mean, I look back at that fondly. Like that was the opportunity that we had growing up to go play and just do some fun stuff. Moving down to Florida after that, Oh, again, being outside, that place has a um uh lot of reptiles. So I remember us spending a lot of time just collecting snakes, lizards, things,
It's
doing
in
some.
Florida.
Yeah, Florida.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I
yeah.
lived in
We
Florida
we
for years. The lizards, the reptiles,
Oh, they're so fun.
alligators, which you gotta watch out for.
Okay, I avoided those. I knew my limits. I knew where to stop. Yeah, but then after that, probably like got more into like sports. Definitely did sports in like middle school, high school. But one other thing about growing up, I was homeschooled, so that led to just having a lot of freedom because that the way that that's structured is you have work you got to get through, but once you're done, you're free. So we planned to like work through it, be done by noon, and then have the rest of the day to get out and do what we wanted.
That's
So.
awesome. That's awesome. Well, they'll understand later why I asked this question. Did you drink a lot of coffee back then?
I didn't, no, but I will say I had my first cup of coffee when we after let's see Arizona, then we moved to England. So in England, this is now my high school years. And so there's different like cultures around food and beverage than we have in the US. And so we would travel to Europe and we got to like visit the castles and like, see these old places. And I remember again fondly having the opportunity to sit down at a cafe and have my first cappuccino. And I think at that time I didn't know how much like I enjoyed it, but it definitely stayed with me, that kind of cafe culture. I was too young for the pub as an American. My British friends weren't, but I was. But I also really did appreciate the pub culture. Again, it's very communal, right? It's just a space to
Yeah.
come hang out and enjoy presence and people and being together. So that definitely stayed with me.
Well, that's interesting because I'm from Canada, which is, they drink a lot of tea up there, coffee now too. So I grew up on tea with milk, if you will, and then
Yes, I do tea with milk because of England.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So tell us about the journey starting with education. You went philosophy at University
Mhm.
of North Florida, as a matter of fact, which is a school that
Yeah.
has grown quite significantly. And then you got your Master of Divinity at Duke around Christian ethics, which is a
Yep.
Jewish guy I find interesting, and and then now the Doctor of Ministry on church economics. So,
Mhm.
what intrigued you down that path, hanging out with all these fighter pilots?
Yeah, right. So I definitely, I want to say black sheep, but I definitely was the odd one in the family, thinking like, okay, I'm not sure I'm really like mentally, built for like war and all of that. So I went
It's good
and became
news.
a man of the cloth instead. I was like, my brother's got that covered, so he went off to be the fighter pilot. But no, actually, as I think about it, moving around a lot and having that military experience growing up, which definitely appreciated. So for me, in my experience, church actually was something that was very stable for me.
Mhm.
Because no matter where we moved, we found a church community to become a part of.
Right.
And so I think that's, for whatever faith, you practice, the community that you're a part of is really important. So that brought some stability. But just because of my love of learning too, that was kind of the place where I got to kind of exercise like those questions about life and faith and the universe. And so I definitely spent a lot of my time thinking deeply about those things, being inside that kind of a community, interacting with others. And it was also a space too where I got to practice some leadership. So I got invited to like lead different groups within the youth group or like within the church, the different kinds of like Bible studies, things like that. And so it was also the church kind of created this space for me to ask those questions, wrestle with it, practice my love of learning, practice leadership. And so by the time high school came around, I felt pretty confident actually of what I felt called to do.
Hmm.
So end of high school, I felt like, yeah, I was going to be moving towards local church work, or maybe in the maybe academic setting. So I kind of set my sights early on to go to school for this philosophy degree to expose me as great as I could to like world religions, different ways of thinking and approaching thought and faith. And then from there, I knew I was planning to head off to do a master's of divinity, which is like the professional degree for a pastor. And for me, Duke, I had set my sights on that sometime in college because I was looking for a school that was rooted in my faith tradition, which is Methodism and Wesleyanism. And so I wanted to kind of stay historically rooted in that. But they had at the time Stanley Hauerwas, a professor of Christian ethics. So I really wanted to study with him. And I think part of like the appeal for ethics for me was, I'm thinking deeply about faith and stuff like that, but I'm also a practitioner. I just love to do stuff. So I love to think about it and then I love to try it and put it into action and see if it works. Or many times it doesn't. So if we had enough time, Mark, I could talk about all my failures of me trying something and it failing utterly. But you pick
By
up.
the way, they're not failures; they're learning experiences.
Okay. So I love learning so much. I'm willing to fail and learn from it. Yeah, so I was thinking like, man, I really want to know how to do things well and do things in a ethical manner. I wanted to kind of approach it, the things that I practice as holistic as I could. So anyway, that's where I went to Duke, study with Hauerwas and learn Christian ethics
No,
before ministry.
that's pretty cool actually, and it leads me to the part of then. How did you navigate your journey around career and life from your initial education? Then you went to pastor and teacher, which are very connected in a lot of ways. Then speaking of doing action, then to volunteering to help homeless and
Yep.
use skill sets and relationships to do that. How did you hone that whole journey?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Long story short on that, as you come out of divinity school, like with this professional degree, you want to get picked up for a church, right? So thankfully I was able to receive a job offer to come to Southern California. So I went from North Carolina all the way to SoCal, fell in love with the area, the diversity, obviously the weather, and just so many things are just beautiful about Southern California. And I was offered a church, so it was my first church, associate pastor, and had the opportunity to like stay to transition to the senior position. Unfortunately, though, what seminary doesn't prepare you for is just like some of the reality of life in ministry. And I ended up actually, sadly, going through a divorce as I was married right out of college. So we were together for about 5, 6 years. And so that in church world is not a good thing. And it's not pleasant, obviously, for any time. And so I had to restart the whole kind of trajectory. And so I found myself down further south in Escondido, where I had some friends of mine that had a church and brought me into Christian school. So I started teaching some seventh grade at a school there. And then just kind of thinking through what was next for me, and had the opportunity to come to Pasadena to restart a church. So my story, the sense of kind of restarting my ministry, tied closely with this opportunity to come to Pasadena and restart a church there. So moved up on my own, and met someone along the way willing to come on this journey with me. So I remarried. Samantha and I became pastors, and we reopened a church in 2011. Well, as we're getting this church going, right, we're out there meeting neighbors, and some of the first neighbors we met were youth, and the youth were sleeping outside the church in the parking lot.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, this isn't good. What's going on? So I did what you kind of any, I think, young pastor would do, is try to find a way to help. So that's how I got involved in homelessness. As I started serving these young people that were sleeping, that were homeless in the church parking lot. And during the day, they would head over to Pasadena City College, our local city college, and some were students and some were just using the amenities. But I just realized, like, man, there's got to be something I could do, because having them just stay in the church parking lot was a very temporary solution. And in fact, pretty negative to the surrounding neighborhood too, right? Because it draws a lot of attention in ways that you don't want to draw it. So
Right.
I helped the youth find the nonprofits in our area that were actually doing really good work and were well established and could handle the needs, and help them with housing and case management and education. Things are way beyond my capacity as this new young church start pastor, but I was still left wondering, like, hey, what can I do? How can I get involved? And so I'm working with what I've got, trying to think through how to make this church get going. And I'm using a facility. I've got a building, I've got a couple parsonages, and I also have this coffee cart. And this coffee cart's just sitting in this church. And the previous church pastor had it and was using it to try to, connect with the local college. I wanted to sell it because that thing had some money and I needed some money for a budget to get the church going, but no one wanted to buy it. So a friend of mine and I had this idea instead, well, we could repurpose it. So we're like, okay, and this is back in 2012. So coffee started to have a new kind of like revival in LA. We've got Stumptown and we've got like Blue Bottle and all these kind of, Bay companies coming down, establishing in LA. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this could work. So we jumped on this new kind of coffee revival bandwagon, learned coffee. Then I started to find baristas locally that would come and I went back to the nonprofits and said, hey, the youth that are ready to transition towards a job, could you send them my way? And we paired them up and they started getting trained in coffee. And that started this whole next kind of journey for me, which also then eventually led on to the church economics as well.
So you could say this was a pick me up for
Yeah.
doing something good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be a little cute there with a pick me up from the coffee and doing something good. But things, whatever religion you're in, whatever you believe, things don't necessarily happen without some reason behind it. And
Yeah.
however that's being happening,
Yeah.
but also it's up to you to take advantage of the things that are happening. And it sounds
Yes.
like that's what you did. So in a way, you were pointed in certain directions to get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, if it wasn't coffee, it was going to be something else, right? And that became the story I was kind of ushered into. And but along the way, you kind of remember some things of your past. Like I remembered, the European culture around coffee. And
Mhm.
I thought like, well, if we can move what we're doing with training the youth beyond just in the church as this program, what would it look like to open a cafe that was community focused? And so I ended up then getting a coffee shop started here in Pasadena back in 2017, and it went from we say cart to cafe, and then we begin to hone the program into focus on foster youth or what are called transitional aged youth. And another part of just my upbringing that I didn't mention, but very obviously foundational for me, is my parents were foster parents, and eventually they ended up adopting three of the children that they were fostering. So I
Wow.
have three adopted siblings, and that's just a part of our family, who they are and who we are just together. But it instilled in me this kind of innate like interest and desire to help young people. And so foster youth, transitional age youth are the youth that we focus and provide job training and job readiness to move them into, in this case, baristas and in the coffee industry. But we've now since expanded to also include other job sites, chocolate, construction, retail, things like that. So we're growing the program slowly.
So we're in the business of connecting dots and people together and whatnot. So
Yes.
here I'm thinking, um, tried your first cappuccino, you kind of liked it. That was way back when.
Yeah.
And then you come, fast forward, you come here. Unfortunately, you get divorced, but that leads you down there. But then it leads you back up here, and there's a coffee cart. What a coincidence!
Yeah. Right.
And you were helping some homeless people before, and then that turns up, and then ties back to the coffee. And you got Rose City Cafe.
Yeah.
I assume was after Rose Bowl, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So no. Yeah. My church was called Rose City Church. So we then moved it. Yep. So we just followed that path. Yep. And then Rosebud became the cart that we took out. Yeah.
Fascinating. So I got to when the light bulb came off, and it was actually a light bulb that kept getting brighter and brighter along your lifetime. It looked like that in a way. Tell us how that's making a difference for people like Tiffany. Tiffany?
Oh,
Trinity.
Trinity. Yeah, Trinity. Yeah, so it's really amazing to be a part of like a larger village of nonprofits that are supporting former foster or former homeless youth, transitional age youth. And the way the village works is these different nonprofits have the opportunity to provide like housing and education case management. So someone like Trinity, and hopefully she'll be able to share her story about this, but going through what she experienced, finding a safe place with one of the local nonprofits, in this case, Youth Moving On, is at a point where now she's ready to establish kind of life on her own, right? Outside the system, beyond the system, what's next? And so then she gets to go through like a career club for job readiness and then come to me. And then we do the hands-on hard skill training of what it takes to be a barista. So Trinity jumps into that. We work with her for at least 3 months, training, on all the skills that you need as a barista. And then at the end of that time, depending on, of course, how well she's doing, then we are able to offer employment. So then Trinity switches over, becomes one of our baristas, and works now at the cafe. And so we've been with her, I think at least a year now, and she's been doing a phenomenal job. So, and then from there, now she's got some cash. She got some inflow of cash to be able to kind of get her own place, and that's where she's moving on to next.
Sounds to me like a great solution to homelessness. And obviously, can't say everybody, but people are just so needy of self-esteem and just a
Oh my
hand.
gosh. Yeah.
And if they
Yeah.
get it, someone once told me you don't know who's going to be the next Einstein, for example, that you help. And they just it might be for a minute that you help them. It might be for a year, but there's so much untapped talent, an area we work in a lot, like Trinity, that can make a difference and contribute and don't have to
Mhm.
be felt sorry for, just
Right.
be helped. And so kind of leads
Yeah.
me to this in a way. When Well, I'll switch a little bit. The fifth industrial revolution has been pretty well coined now to be about humanity, where the
Mm.
fourth is about technology, AI, AR, VR, and all that. But the fifth is
Yeah.
about humanity, and which is one half reason for our firm name, Fifth Element Group. Um, Inclusion is a big priority in that to make that happen. Can you expand on how you see the work you're doing with the Alliance for Southern California Innovation, how it actually aligns in an interesting way with what you do at Rose City Cafe efforts, where you're making an economic impact, you're
Yeah.
making a social impact, it impacts the families, it impacts the clients that get the coffee and whatnot,
That's
or
right.
the clients of the companies that are innovators in Pasadena and Southern California. It impacts the whole community.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And a quick, fascinating story in that. So, as I'm a local clergyman, local pastor, and I begin to help the city address homelessness from a faith perspective by drawing together the faith leaders. And I formed a couple of committees that fall under this work of the city. And as we would meet together, we'd have these ideas of like, hey, I think if as a city we approach homelessness in this way, we would take those to city council. And one of the city council members, Andy Wilson, I have met him, and he was supportive of a lot of these innovative approaches to like addressing homelessness. So anytime we needed someone on the city council member to talk to or like advocate for us, we go to Andy Wilson. So I'm transitioning out of my church in 2020. I've been there, I think about almost 10 years, ready for a change, ready to focus on what I've been doing with the cafe and the nonprofit now. And so Andy said, hey, well, we're hiring for this nonprofit that I lead. And I'm like, okay, what's that? He's like, the Alliance. I was like, I don't know. Yeah, the Alliance for SoCal Innovation. He's the executive director. And he's like, we're hiring for a position that is for a program called the SoCal Venture Pipeline Program. I'm like, cool, tell me more. He's like, it's a program where we get to go out and find founders and startups in Southern California and help them access capital, help them, find the investor that fits their industry and their focus. I'm like, that sounds awesome. So I jumped in with Andy and the Alliance almost a year ago now to be a program manager to help manage this program. And the overlap, I mean, yeah, like you pointed out, Mark, it's really interesting because in one way with the youth and the coffee shop, it's an economic engine for social good, and it creates jobs for people that don't easily access those jobs. And then on the Alliance, we're kind of being able to do the same thing, but at a more macro scale because we cover all of Southern California. But in this case, we're creating jobs through these startup companies by helping them scale through the investment funds that are looking to match with them. And the cool part too is like in innovation and technology, you can also find really good paying jobs, which we need here in Southern California. So we're able to help these founders access that capital, that venture capitalist funding, and start scaling. And as they scale, now they're hiring the people locally, and the whole system grows. But it's a way that we get to serve and do something good out of it. But I think at the same time, like when you focus on doing something good with your nonprofit or with your business, everyone wins, right? And you get to like just enjoy the impact that it's having, and this way that it kind of like cycles and comes back, and others help you, and it's just a really awesome thing to be a part of.
Yeah, and it's not even rocket science, but it's
No.
brilliant at the same time. And I share all the time. People go home at night, talk to either their parents or their kids or whatnot, and they come home saying either, "Oh, I'm so tired. Work sucks. My boss is terrible. I don't even know what we're doing. There's no purpose. Give me a beer. I'm going to sit on the sofa." Or they come home and say, "You guys, let's have dinner together. We got to talk about what just
Yeah.
happened at the office." And the parents or the kids or both hear that,
Yes.
and then it expands, and it's not that hard to be kind. It's not that hard to help. It's not that hard, and it makes a big impact. And we'll talk about influencers in a second, but you were gonna say something on
Well, I
that.
was just going to add that like I wouldn't be where I am without the social capital and the support I've received to do any of this work. Right. So as soon as you're willing to like in a sense like put yourself out there to say like I want to have an impact, I want something to do good work, and I focus on the good part, so many people come out and say, yeah, let's get behind it. And so Andy helping me with the Alliance to what I'm doing with the cafe, all supported, trust me, by social capital.
And all supported by the people you helped, which turned it
Yeah.
the other way too. And yeah, we do one little story with you. I'll say we work a lot with untapped talent, meaning refugees, veterans, previously incarcerated people. Um, Andy looked at you, not your resume that didn't fit into that job.
Exactly. Yep.
And that's important because
Yeah.
there's a lot of veterans that are sometimes stereotyped into, well, you only know logistics or you only
Right.
know leadership. Can you fit into this? Can you fit in that? We're talking about people, not words
Yeah.
on a resume.
Yeah. And if there's anything that I can encourage is like just get out there and help, volunteer, connect, be a part of that larger, neighborhood or the village or the community, whatever. Because that's how you get to know the people. And then they get to know you and your character, and they're willing to vouch based off of that. Yeah.
Without a doubt. I'll tell you one little quick story, then I have one last question.
Okay. Okay.
In LA, they say, keep them wanting more so you can do a sequel, right? So I guess we'll do that. But in Canada, in Winnipeg, Canada, I was there for a couple of years, and I was the first Jewish guy to run the Santa Claus parade. That was my claim to fame. And, but I met this guy years ago who's looking for a job or whatever with what we do, and he said he doesn't really have any experience. And I looked at the bottom of his resume and it said Santa Claus parade, which I
Oh,
paid more attention to because of that I had done
yes.
one.
Yeah.
And I'd done a lot of community stuff. So I started talking to him and said, that's really interesting, Santa Claus parade. That must have been interesting. And he started saying, oh, you don't have no idea. I had to go to the city to get permits. I had to do budget. I had to depend on what's the weather going to be, and if that goes bad, I had to get sponsors and what position they're going to be in the parade, and are they arguing about it or not arguing about it? This and that. I told him, yeah, you don't have much experience at all. Right? So you got to look at what they did, what their
Yeah.
experiences are, type of thing. Last question on this part,
Sure. Yeah.
one that I love. A client told me in 2021, one of the best lines I've heard is, he said, Mark, the year 2020, that famous year, it flew by slowly, he said. And I said, that's so true, almost even of the last 2 or 3 years. It's kind of like
Yeah.
a blend for people. So with all that's happened, what are you most grateful for? And
Mhm.
also, what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah. Okay. Well, definitely most grateful for family, because those were difficult times. I mean, I remember kids on computers trying to get through Zoom school. My wife's the teacher. She was in the garage on Zoom school teaching, her. So it's just amazing though, like all the time that we got together and we got to have as a family. And it really, I think, brought us much closer. So I'm very grateful, even though that was a very difficult time just for family, the family ties, family bonds. And also, I think, from that too, like as things begun to thaw and we kind of got back out, like it made me appreciate my friends and my local community even more. So at some point during that time for the cafe, we actually pivoted and added in a microbrewery. So now we've got beer in the afternoon. So my whole, British pub days actually came home
There you
eventually.
go. It's
Kind of funny.
again.
Another story kind of happened on its own, but I really like don't take for granted now the times we have to just sit, relax, spend, time talking, having a drink, getting to know one another. Something I'm definitely grateful for and really appreciate. And then, people like Andy Wilson, like giving me this opportunity with the Alliance and kind of, expanding that network. And that's really awesome. And what I'm hopeful for, though, is I have obviously personally received so much from, let's say, the social enterprise of the cafe and the good that it does as a business, but also the work that the Alliance does and the good that it brings to businesses.
Mhm.
And I'm hopeful that our economy, right, can in a way kind of like get to a new level where it's beyond just money and it can move into something where money is an engine for good, and it gets back to where like it's just a tool that has a greater impact. And so I'm hopeful for this next generation that's very like socially minded, that we're going to have a lot of entrepreneurs that will become social entrepreneurs, right? They're going to use the idea they have, the innovation that's in them, to not, of course, make money, right? Because that's what keeps the things turning, but to also be able to have an impact and do something good with that business and that idea.
Well said. And I can let you know that we work with a lot that are doing that,
Yes. Yeah.
and leaders have realized that if they don't care about um, doing good and helping people and taking care of employees and whatnot, then it's people won't want to work there. Number one,
Yeah.
but your business can do way better when you are
So
doing it
much.
at the same
So
time.
much. Yeah.
So, so I'm grateful that you are a leader who cares. I'm
Thanks,
grateful
Mark.
that you didn't sell the coffee cart.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you had a cappuccino and whatnot, and weren't allowed into the pubs yet. At
Yeah.
that was the delay for the next stage.
It was. Yeah.
And I'm more than hopeful after hearing some of the stuff you're doing that you've helped homeless people and gals like Trinity. Way to go, man. We're really hopeful for the future because of people like you. So thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate the opportunity to share my story and take this time with you. So thanks for having me. And yeah, hopefully this will inspire a few more social entrepreneurs along the way.
Well, you inspired me, so that's a good start. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, this is pretty cool. Welcome, Trinity,
Trinity.
to the Leaders Who Care series. I'm super glad you brought Dan along with you because we do need you, Dan. And
Okay, okay.
you
I mean,
guys,
Trinity's all good on her own, so
uh,
I'm just extra right now.
well, Trinity, can you first of all, can you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little about where you are, where you're from, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Trinity Casey. I was born in LA, but I was raised in Pomona. And I moved to Pasadena about 2 years ago. And I'm a barista now here at Rosebud Coffee. So that's the gist of everything right now.
Good gist. I just finished my second and a half cup of coffee. Keep going, I will say my hair will stand up, but I don't know if you'll notice.
Yeah.
Um, so tell us a little bit about how you guys met and how this whole relationship, if you will, started.
So I actually moved to Pasadena through YMO. I kind of was going through a rough patch at the time. And so I decided like a new change of scenery would be great. And YMO thankfully was able to get me somewhere to live. So I'm in a transitional housing, and that's been really helpful. So through them, they have like a kind of like a internship program, where they have you working at different places just to get experience. And in exchange, they give you like a little mini paycheck that's through them. It's like a nonprofit kind of thing. So before COVID, I had already been working somewhere else, but then COVID happened. So, and then I ended up moving. So I needed another place to finish up my hours. I had maybe like 100 left. So there was a spot at Rosebud, and I was like, this is so cool. I've always wanted to work with coffee. It just looks so fun. So Dan took me in and did all my training through him. He taught me all the ropes, got behind the bar, started making drinks, and I love it. It's so fun. I like to think of it as like you're an alchemist and you're just like mixing all these potions together
That's good.
and make these like really cool concoctions. And yeah, so I finished up my hours. And I really enjoyed working with coffee so much that I was like, I want to continue doing this. This is like something I really, really enjoy. And Dan happened to have a spot open for me as a full-on barista. So I took the opportunity and I'm still here a year later.
Yeah.
Said it wouldn't last. What did they know?
That's right. And Mark, real quick on my end, so YMO is Youth Moving On, a local youth service provider that we partner with. But when they had referred Trinity to us and we did our interview, and we said, yes, Trinity, let's do this. Let's do the training together. One of the first things we train in is taste. We want to be able to like help someone understand the taste in coffee. And I remember for Trinity, she has a great palate and surprised me with her ability to talk about the different flavors in the coffee. And I'm a few years into this, and I'm still figuring it out, but she had great taste, spot on. I was like, okay, yeah, she's gonna be a good fit. She's got what it takes.
No, I love it. Well, Trinity, tell us why this is more than just a job.
Well, I think it just gives me a lot of motivation just to sometimes even get up and go and be productive. I have depression, so sometimes living through depression is just really hard to sometimes like find something to get up for and to strive for, because that sadness kind of feeling is so strong at times. But I really think that being able to work here and making a drink and seeing somebody take that first sip and be like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Like, that's all I need to wake up every day. That's all I need.
I know it's amazing. Dan and I've talked about this. There's the thing that fills people's hearts and souls more than anything, it's been proven, is belonging.
Mhm.
And that then impacts self-esteem, that you're doing something that's worthwhile. And as you said, making people happy. Dan, how aside from her great palate, what did you see in Trinity, and what have you seen in Trinity happen during this whole experience?
Yeah, for sure. So when Trinity first joined the program and was getting trained in coffee, I felt actually she was pretty timid at the beginning. I remember, though you were confident in the palate, but the whole like teamwork and being part of the group, it was a little bit of a process. And in fact, there was not long after Trinity joined with us, maybe like 2 months into it, you actually were gone for a while. So different story, but Trinity was gone for about 3 months. And we don't know exactly what had happened, but we just kind of waited and connected with Youth Moving On. And then when you went through that patch and came back, I felt like at that time it was kind of like almost a restart, but with a new level of like passion and like energy. And then for me, I've seen Trinity just really open up and be very, very outgoing in an awesome, positive way that brings a lot of like light and life to the shop. And just finding more confidence in like what she's doing and how she's doing it, interacting with the customers. And now even to the point where on a weekend, you're kind of one of the main baristas that's holding the fort down in our busiest time. I mean, like just last weekend when you had that fire alarm and you called, I was like, okay, here's our steps of what you got to do to address a false, fire alarm. I'm not sure how that happened.
Yeah.
But she had already taken care of 2 of them on her own, without even having to like walk her through it. So I just seen a lot of growth in confidence, outgoing, and yeah, just owning the job really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
A couple last things, Trinity, how would you help others like you? What would you tell them through the process that you've been through, why it's important, and how we can attract more people like you to take that next step, to get self-esteem, to make a difference, to feel good about themselves, and then even pay it forward to others?
I honestly what it like want me to help others is just remembering those people that helped me, and wanting to pay them forward for all that they've done, and to be able to do that for somebody else is like, it's kind of like a full circle thing, where you give somebody that opportunity that you might have not gotten, and I think that's super important. And then also just taking it day by day. I think sometimes people are so focused on getting to that end goal of like wanting to be the best and like wanting to know everything, which I definitely was that person where like I wanted to be perfect the first time. But sometimes that's just not possible and you just have to work at it, and that's okay. And that's I think that's the best way to do it, honestly.
That's a great point, because there's a lot of people out there that are depressed or unhappy or feel like they've failed if they don't become Oprah, or they don't become
Yeah.
star, that star, that star. Kobe Bryant said something brilliant way before he passed away. He said, "No, everybody's going for the dream, which is great. You got to go for the dream. But what they need to know is this is actually the dream right now."
That's good. Yeah.
And so what you're saying is really important. And congratulations on where you've got to, and more importantly, where you're going to. Any last comments you want to make to people listening about your story?
Yeah. Just stay positive, honestly. And don't try to go overboard. I think just like you said, like live in the moment, take it moment by moment, and just enjoy living life, just enjoy it because it's not very long. And
And your smile, all you have to do is smile at people, and you make an impact there. So keep smiling and keep going for it. And we wish you all the best. Congrats.
Thank you so much.